The year is 1941, and the Romanian Royal Army stands at a crossroads of destiny and fire. Between the steel of the Third Reich and the red tide of the Soviets, a nation prepares for war. These soldiers carry a mosaic of weaponry, a collection of steel that tells a story of survival. This is the definitive chronicle of the arms that shaped Romania's role in the greatest conflict ever known. Romania's participation in the war was a journey through the most brutal landscapes of the Eastern Front, from the sun-scorched steppes of Ukraine to the frozen, skeletal ruins of the nightmare known as Stalingrad. Romanian infantrymen marched from the high Caucasus Mountains to the final urban battles in the heart of Europe. They were a force defined by their adaptability, wielding an arsenal that reflected a complex and shifting history. To look at a Romanian squad was to see a fascinating amalgamation of global, industrial, military history. You would find indigenous designs forged in local arsenals alongside French weapons from the interwar golden era. There were captured Soviet guns seized during the lightning advance and German masterpieces supplied by an uneasy ally. After the dramatic switch of 1944, additional Soviet arms arrived as Romania turned its sights toward the West. This diversity was a double-edged sword that created a logistical puzzle of nearly impossible proportions. Officers struggled to supply different calibers of ammunition to units fighting side by side in the same muddy trenches. Yet this chaos also highlighted the incredible resourcefulness of the individual Romanian soldier on the ground. They became masters of the trophy weapon, making use of whatever steel was available to keep the line. The story of these weapons begins with the reliable Mannlicher rifles that formed the backbone of the line, continues through the lethal ZB machine guns that provided the rhythmic heartbeat of every infantry squad. See the evolution from vintage French grenades to the terrifying German Panzerfausts used against heavy Soviet tanks. These tools of war are the silent witnesses to a nation caught in the violent maelstrom of total war. Romanian soldiers fought with a level of courage that often defied their material and industrial disadvantages. They achieved notable successes in the field, even when they were outgunned by far better equipped opponents. This examination explores every category of weapon, from the sidearms of officers to the heavy mortar of the rear. We will see how these tools performed when the metal met the bone in the world's most devastating conflict. The foundation of this entire military structure was the Mannlicher M1893 bolt-action service rifle. It had served as the standard infantry arm for decades and remained the primary weapon throughout the war. Based on an Austrian design, it was manufactured under license at the famous Kuger arsenal within Romania. This made it one of the few truly indigenous firearms produced by the country's limited industrial base. The M1893 was chambered for the 6.5 by 53 mmR cartridge, a rimmed round unique to the Romanian military's needs. This specific bullet offered a sophisticated balance of ballistic performance and relatively moderate shoulder recoil. It propelled a 6.5 mm projectile at 730 meters per second, providing an effective killing range of 600 meters. For the average infantryman, it was a balanced tool designed for the traditional marksmanship of the era. The defining feature of the Mannlicher was its straight pull bolt action, a departure from traditional turn bolt designs. Instead of for movements to cycle the action, the soldier only had to pull back and push forward. This theoretically allowed for a much higher rate of aimed fire during the heat of a close-quarters engagement. However, the mechanism was mechanically complex and far more sensitive to the grit and grime of the battlefield. Loading the rifle required the use of an en-bloc clip system that held 5 rounds of ammunition together. This clip was inserted into the internal magazine and remained there until the final round was chambered. Once empty, the metal clip would drop out through a specialized slot in the bottom of the rifle. While fast to reload, it prevented soldiers from topping off a partially full magazine during a lull in fighting. The rifle was a substantial piece of walnut and steel, measuring approximately 1,230 millimeters in total length. With a barrel length of 765 millimeters, it was a full-sized military firearm typical of the early 20th century.
Ow.
It weighed roughly 4.2 kilograms unloaded, a weight that was reasonable for long marches across the endless steppes. Its sights were simple: a front barleycorn and a tangent rear sight graduated for long-distance firing. In the opening stages of Operation Barbarossa, the Mannlicher was the primary tool used to push into the USSR. It saw heavy action in the campaigns for Ukraine and the long, bloody road toward the River Volga. Romanian soldiers became intimately allied, familiar with the clack of the straight pole bolt in the heat of battle. But as the Russian winter arrived, the rifle's sophisticated design began to show its age and its weaknesses. The 6.5mm cartridge lacked the raw stopping power and barrier penetration of the larger German or Soviet rounds. When engaging enemies behind thick logs or stone walls, the Romanian soldiers found themselves at a disadvantage. Furthermore, the straight pull action proved prone to jamming when mud and ice invaded the tight mechanical tolerances. Despite this, it remained the most common rifle in the Romanian arsenal until the very end of the war. For those who needed a more compact solution, Romania produced the Mannlicher M1893 cavalry carbine variant. This weapon was essential for mountain troops, cavalry, and specialized support units requiring a shorter profile. It retained the same straight pull action and 6.5mm caliber, but featured a significantly shortened barrel. This reduction in length made it much easier to handle in the rugged terrain of the Carpathian Mountains. The carbine weighed only 3.5 kilograms, making it a favorite for soldiers who had to climb or ride. While the shorter barrel reduced muzzle velocity and effective range, the trade-off in portability was considered worth it. As the role of traditional horse cavalry diminished, these carbines were often redistributed to heavy weapon crews. They provided a lightweight personal defense weapon for those already burdened with machine gun parts or mortar. Another rare but high-quality addition to the arsenal was the Mannlicher Schonauer M1903 Austrian rifle. These weapons were superior in build quality and featured a unique, incredibly smooth rotary magazine design. The rotary system eliminated the need for the end-block clip, allowing rounds to be loaded individually or via clips. However, they were chambered in a different 6.5mm cartridge, which caused a nightmare for the supply sergeants. Because of the ammunition mismatch, the Schonauer was usually reserved for elite units or re-echelon guards, was a sophisticated firearm, but the logistical burden of two different 6.5mm rounds was too high. Most of these rifles were eventually withdrawn as the war intensified, and standardization became a matter of life or death. Still, those who carried the Schonauer appreciated its reliability and the smoothness of its legendary bolt. As the Romanian army pushed deeper into Soviet territory, a new rifle began to appear in their ranks. The Soviet Mosin-Nagant M1891 30ths was captured in staggering numbers during the massive encirclements of 1941. This was a rugged, turn-bolt weapon chambered in the powerful 7.62 x 54 mmR cartridge, a round with immense history. Romanian soldiers quickly learned that the Mosin was nearly indestructible, even in the worst weather conditions. The Mosin-Nagant featured a simple internal box magazine that could be loaded with 5 rounds via stripper clips. Unlike the Mannlicher, the Mosin could be easily topped off with single rounds at any time during a fight. Its 7.62mm bullet offered significantly more power and long-range lethality than the standard Romanian 6.5mm issue. This made the trophy Mosins very popular among frontline troops who could find enough captured ammunition. Entire Romanian units were eventually equipped with these captured Soviet rifles to simplify the supply of parts. The turn-bolt action was slower than the Mannlicher, but much more resistant to the freezing mud of the East. After the switch to the Allied side in 1944, the Mosin became even more prominent as a standard issue. It represented the transition of Romania from the orbit of the Axis to the influence of the Soviets. Germany also played a role in arming Romania, supplying various models of the legendary Mauser bolt-action rifles. These included the long Guhar 98 from the Great War and the more modern, iconic Kar 98K carbine. Chambered in 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser, these were arguably the finest bolt-action military rifles ever manufactured in history. They featured the incredibly strong Mauser 98 action with dual locking lugs and a controlled feed claw extractor. The Kar 98K was the gold standard for the German Wehrmacht and a prized possession for any Romanian soldier. Elite units often received priority for these German supplies to ensure ammunition commonality with their neighbors on the line. The 7.92 mm round was devastatingly powerful, capable of accurate fire at distances exceeding 800 meters in skilled hands. However, just like the Soviet rifles, adding the Mauser meant adding yet another caliber to the supply chain. One of the rarest prizes on the battlefield was the Soviet SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle, a true cutting-edge design. It allowed a soldier to fire 10 rounds as fast as he could pull the trigger without moving a bolt. Romanian marksmen and elite troops prized these rifles for the massive fire superiority they provided in a skirmish. However, the SVT-40 was a temperamental weapon that required constant cleaning and expert maintenance to function. Most Romanian soldiers lacked the specialized training to keep the gas-operated SVT-40 running in the muddy trenches. Malfunctions were common when the rifle was neglected, leading many to eventually trade them back for a reliable bolt gun. While they worked, they offered a glimpse into the future of infantry combat, where semi-automatic fire would rule. But in the harsh reality of 1942, simplicity was often more valuable than a high rate of fire. In the realm of sidearms, the Austrian Steyr M1912 was the standard pistol for Romanian officers and pilots. It was a robust semi-automatic handgun featuring a unique rotating barrel locking system that aided in its accuracy. It held 8 rounds in a fixed magazine that had to be loaded from the top using a stripper clip. This made it a reliable sidearm, though it lacked the quick reload capability of pistols with detachable magazines. Italy also contributed to the sidearm arsenal by supplying the compact and reliable Beretta M1934 pistol. Chambered in 9mm Kurz, it was a simple blowback-operated handgun that was easy to carry and maintain in the field. Romanian officers appreciated its small size and its legendary Italian craftsmanship, making it a status symbol as much as a tool. However, the surrender of Italy in 1943 eventually cut off the supply of spare parts and ammunition. Captured Soviet Nagant M1895 revolvers were another common sight, particularly among rear echelon and police units. This unique revolver featured a gas seal system that prevented hot gases from escaping between the cylinder and barrel. It was an incredibly rugged tool, famous for being able to function even after being submerged in thick mud. While underpowered and slow to reload, its absolute reliability made it a respected piece of equipment in the East. Late in the war, limited numbers of German Luger P08 and Walther P38 pistols were distributed to Romanian commanders. The P38 was a modern double-action pistol that was highly sought after for its reliability and its 9mm Parabellum caliber. These German handguns represented the height of military sidearm technology during the Second World War era. For a Romanian officer, carrying a P-38 was a sign of being part of a modern mechanized fighting force. As the war moved into urban environments and thick forests, the need for rapid fire led to the rise of submachine guns. The Arita M1941 was Romania's most significant indigenous small-arms success story during the entire conflict. Designed by Captain Marin Arita, it was a 9mm submachine gun that proved Romania could build world-class weaponry. It featured a folding metal stock and a selective fire switch, allowing for both single shots and automatic fire. The Arita fired at a rate of 600 rounds per minute and fed from a 25-round magazine inserted from the side. This side-loading feature allowed soldiers to stay lower to the ground while firing from a prone position. It was built using stamped metal components to speed up production in Romania's limited industrial facilities during the war. Between 20,000 and 40,000 were produced, equipping assault troops who needed portable, high-volume firepower in close combat. The German MP-40 was another iconic submachine gun that saw extensive use within the ranks of the Romanian army. Known for its compact folding stock and controllable 500 round per minute rate of fire, it was a soldier's favorite. It was typically issued to squad leaders and paratroopers who moved in and out of vehicles in tight spaces. The MP-40's 32-round magazine and 9mm caliber made it a perfect partner for the indigenous Orita submachine gun. No weapon defined the brutality of the Eastern Front. Submachine gun battles like the Soviet PPSH-41. With its massive 71-round drum magazine, it could lay down a terrifying curtain of lead that few could survive. Romanian troops captured these in the thousands and immediately put them to use against their former owners during the advance. The PPSH-41 was crude and heavy, but its burp gun rate of fire was unmatched by anything the Axis possessed. By 1944, PPSH-41 became the unofficial standard submachine gun of the Romanian military, as Soviet supplies increased. Romanian soldiers preferred its powerful 7.62mm Tokarev round, which had better range and penetration than the 9mm Parabellum. The high-capacity drum allowed a soldier to clear an entire house without needing to stop and change his magazine. It was a weapon designed for the total war of attrition that characterized the final years of the conflict. A simplified version known as the PPS-43 was also introduced late in the war to Romanian armored and vehicle crews. It was made almost entirely of stamped steel and featured a folding stock that made it extremely compact. While it lacked the drum magazine of the PPSH, its 35-round stick magazines were much more reliable and easier to carry. It was a no-frills weapon of necessity, representing the desperate industrial reality of the Soviet-led Allied advance. The backbone of every Romanian infantry squad's firepower was the Czechoslovakian ZB-26 or ZB-30 light machine gun. These were arguably the finest light machine guns of the era. Later serving as the inspiration for the British Brin, they were gas-operated, or cooled, and featured a distinctive top-mounted 20-round box magazine that allowed for easy prone firing. Romanian gunners loved the ZB for its incredible accuracy and its legendary reliability in the dust and mud. The ZB was chambered in 7.92mm Mauser, giving the squad a powerful long-range automatic fire capability. It featured a quick change barrel system that allowed the crew to swap out a hot barrel in just a few seconds. This meant the ZB could maintain sustained fire during a heavy enemy assault, without the risk of melting the rifling. It was the heavy hitter of the platoon, and every Romanian infantryman felt safer with a ZB nearby. Romanian machine gunners underwent rigorous training to master the ZB's mechanics and its unique top-loading feed system. In the defensive battles of Ukraine, the ZB proved to be the difference between holding a line and being overrun. Even when the rest of the squad carried 6.5mm Mannlichers, the ZB gunner carried the 7.92mm big stick of the unit. Its success was so great that it remained in Romanian service for decades following the war's end. Just like the rifles, captured Soviet light machine guns like the DP-28 were frequently integrated into Romanian units. The DP-28 was famous for its pan magazine that sat on top of the barrel, holding 47 rounds of ammunition. It was a simple, rugged gun that could survive being dragged through the dirt of the Russian plains without failing. While the magazine was awkward to carry, the firepower it provided was a welcome addition to any Romanian squad. Late in the war, elite Romanian formations also received small numbers of the terrifying German MG-34 and MG-42. The MG-42, known as Hitler's buzzsaw, had an astounding rate of fire of 1,200 rounds per minute. This was so fast that the human ear could barely distinguish individual shots, hearing only a continuous tearing sound. While these guns were hungry for ammunition, they provided an unmatched level of suppression on the battlefield. For the heaviest sustained fire, Romania relied on the aging but effective Austrian Schorzlow's MO7-12 heavy machine gun. This was a water-cooled beast that required a jacket of liquid around the barrel to prevent overheating during fire. It was mechanically simple but incredibly heavy, requiring a dedicated team and a sturdy tripod mount to operate. Because it was chambered in an obsolete 8mm cartridge, it eventually created yet another ammunition supply crisis. The Schorzlow's was usually placed in fixed defensive positions or bunkers where its weight was not a major disadvantage. It could fire for hours without stopping, as long as the crew kept the water jacket filled and the belts coming. However, as the war became more mobile, these heavy water-cooled guns were slowly phased out in favor of air-cooled designs. They were relics of the First World War, still struggling to find a place in the Second. Their replacement often came in the form of captured Soviet Maxim M1910 heavy machine guns. The classic Iron Horse of the East. The Maxim was also water-cooled, but featured a wheeled Sokolov mount that allowed it to be moved more easily. It was legendary for its ability to fire thousands of rounds without a single jam or mechanical failure. Romanian troops appreciated the shield on the Maxim, which provided the gunner with a small measure of protection. In the early years, the Swedish-designed 37mm Bofors anti-tank gun was Romania's primary defense against enemy armor. It was a light, highly accurate gun that could be towed by a small truck, or even moved by hand. At the start of the war, its 37mm shells were capable of knocking out most light and medium Soviet tanks. However, as the T-34 and KV-1 appeared, the Bofors found itself hopelessly outmatched by thicker Russian steel. By 1943, Romanian infantry were facing a crisis as Soviet tanks became nearly immune to their existing anti-tank guns. The arrival of the German Panzerfaust changed the game entirely, giving the individual soldier a chance to fight back. The Panzerfaust was a simple, disposable tube that fired a massive shape-charge warhead using a recoilless principle. It could punch through 200 millimeters of armor, enough to destroy any tank the Soviets could put on the field. The Panzerfaust required very little training to use, making it the ultimate weapon for a desperate defense. A Romanian soldier could hide in a bush or a ruin, wait for a tank to pass, and fire from close range. The explosion was devastating, often turning a multi-ton tank into a burning coffin in a matter of seconds. Supply was always the issue, as Romania never received enough of these tank fists to fully equip their men. Germany also provided the Panzerschreck, a reusable rocket launcher that was much more powerful than the American bazooka. It fired an 88mm rocket that could kill a tank from over 150 meters away, a significant improvement in range. The Panzerschreck required a two-man team, a gunner and a loader to feed the heavy rockets into the back. It was a heavy, awkward weapon, but its tank terror name was well earned on the battlefields of 1944. To support the infantry from a distance, Romania utilized the excellent French 81mm Brandt mortar system. This was the most successful mortar design of the 20th century, providing high-angle fire that could drop shells behind cover. It could be broken down into 3 man-portable loads, allowing it to follow the infantry through any terrain. Its high-explosive shells were devastating against enemy machine gun nests and concentrated troops. Romanian mortar teams were highly skilled in the mathematics of indirect fire, often providing support within minutes of a request. The 81mm Brandt had a range of 3,000 meters, allowing it to stay safely behind the front lines while still being effective. It was the battalion's primary artillery, providing a level of fire, support that the individual soldier couldn't achieve alone. It remained a staple of the Romanian army throughout the entire duration of the war. For even closer support, the 60mm light mortar was used at the company level to provide immediate firepower. These small mortars weighed only 19 kilograms and could be operated by just 2 men during a fast-moving assault. While their shells were smaller, Their ability to be right there in the front line was incredibly valuable to the troops. They were used to lay down smoke screens or to illuminate the battlefield with flares during a night attack. The variety of these weapons tells the story of a nation that was constantly trying to catch up to the industrial powers. Romania was a country of limited manufacturing, forced to rely on the cast-offs and sales of larger, more powerful nations. Yet the Romanian soldier proved that a weapon is only as good as the man who is carrying it. They took this misfit arsenal and turned it into a functioning, lethal force on the Eastern Front. Logistics was the silent enemy that the Romanians had to fight every single day of the campaign. Imagine a supply sergeant trying to find 6.5 millimeters, 7.62 millimeters, 7.92 millimeters, and 9 millimeters ammunition for a single regiment in a blizzard. It was a complex puzzle that required improvisation, grit, and often the use of captured enemy supplies to fill the gaps. That the Romanian army functioned at all under these conditions is a testament to their organizational determination. The quality of the weapons varied wildly, from the world-class ZB machine guns to the obsolete water-cooled relics. Some soldiers went into battle with the latest German technology, while others carried rifles that their fathers had used. This equipment gap often meant that Romanian units were vulnerable when faced with a modernized Soviet armored thrust. But in the defensive battles of the mountains and forests, these older weapons still found a way to be deadly. The frozen steppes of the Soviet Union were the ultimate testing ground for this diverse collection of steel and wood. The extreme cold of 1941 and 1942 froze the grease in the Mannlicher bolts and jammed the sophisticated semi-automatics. Only the most rugged weapons, like the Mosin and the ZB machine gun, seemed to thrive in these hellish conditions. Romanian soldiers learned to use kerosene and thin oils to keep their actions moving when the temperature plummeted. In the urban hell of Stalingrad, the Romanian arsenal was pushed to its absolute breaking point in the ruins. Submachine guns like the Arita and the PPSH became the only weapons that mattered in the room-to-room fighting. Grenades, many of them old French designs, were thrown in the thousands as the Romanians tried to hold their sectors. It was here that the lack of heavy anti-tank weapons became a fatal flaw for many Romanian divisions. After the coup of August 1944, the Romanian army faced the daunting task of fighting their former German allies. The weapons that had been supplied by Germany were now turned against the Wehrmacht in a desperate struggle for liberation. This period saw the greatest mix of weaponry yet, as Soviet supplies began to arrive to replace German losses. A Romanian soldier might be wearing a German-style helmet while firing a Soviet submachine gun at a German tank. By the final battles in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, the Romanian military was beginning to standardize on Soviet patterns. The Mannlicher was slowly being replaced by the Mosin, and the ZB was being traded for the Soviet DP-28 light machine gun. This was the beginning of the Cold War era for Romania, as they moved into the Soviet sphere of influence. The transition was a bloody and chaotic one, carried out in the heat of a continuous westward advance. Today, many of these weapons can be found in the National Military Museum in Bucharest, silent reminders of a lost era.
Wow.
They are preserved in glass, their steel oiled, and their wood polished. Far from the mud of the Eastern Front, to look at them is to see the physical history of the Romanian people during their most difficult and transformative years. Each rifle and machine gun carries the ghosts of the men who carried them into the fire. The Mannlicher rifles, the Arita submachine guns, and the ZB machine guns remain symbols of Romanian engineering and resilience. They represent a time when the nation had to arm its sons with whatever could be bought, built, or stolen. They are a tribute to the ingenuity of a nation that refused to be silenced by the giants of the East and West. The diverse arsenal of World War II is a core part of Romania's complex and enduring military legacy. We must remember the individual soldiers who gripped these weapons with frozen fingers in the trenches of the Volga. They were not just statistics in a history book. They were men who experienced the war through the sights of these guns. Whether they were victorious or defeated, they carried their steel with a sense of duty and a determination to survive. Their weapons were their constant companions through the hunger, the cold, and the relentless fear of battle. As we close this examination of Romania's infantry weapons, let us reflect on the immense price paid in blood. These tools of war, in all their variety and complexity, were the means by which a generation fought for their country's future. From the bolt-action rifle to the anti-tank rocket, they tell a story of sacrifice that should never be forgotten. The steel of the Romanian arsenal is a testament to the enduring spirit of a soldier caught in total war,